And welcome back to the NFLandU podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hayden Vassar, coming to you on Tuesday, December 17th. And we had one heck of an NFL weekend, didn't we? Week 15, I think? Yeah, week 15. I had to look at my notes because I wasn't sure. Uh, Big upsets, history-breaking performances all around, and an entirely new playoff order in the NFC. A literal metric ton to get to with 16 games to recap today. Before we get into all of that, I just want to mention we went 9-7 in our picks last week, so that's pretty good, am I right? Only 2 weeks left to go, so a win's a win, am I right? So, let's get into the recaps. We're going to recap all 16 games from Sunday and Monday night, and I think the best place to start was the most surprising result of the weekend, and a game that not enough people are talking about. I'm talking about Atlanta at San Francisco. Let's get into it. Atlanta wins a stunning upset, 29-22. Atlanta improves to 5-9, and they've suddenly won 2 straight here down the stretch. And San Francisco just absolutely dropped the ball in this one, falls to 11-3, and it shakes up the entire playoff order now. Now, if you didn't watch the ending of this game, the little bit of controversy, depending on who you ask. Atlanta gets the ball back. They're down a couple points super late in this game. Matt Ryan gets them into the red zone, and he hits I think it was Austin Hooper, yeah. I don't know why I said it wasn't. He hit Austin Hooper in the end zone. Austin Hooper had the ball for a split second. The problem was it looked like the ball hit the ground, and he lost possession at one point. The refs go to review, and they say instead of a touchdown, they're going to rule it incomplete. So they take the would-be touchdown off the board. So what happens literally the very next play, if I remember correctly, Matt Ryan hits Julio Jones, who had an absolutely fantastic final drive, right at the goal line for the go-ahead score. And I'm talking inches. Literally inches that ball broke the plane. And it was correctly ruled a touchdown with 2 seconds left to give the Falcons the lead, a 1-point lead. Remember that. They got the lead by 1 point. They went up 23-22. For some reason, they decided to kneel instead of kicking an extra point, I guess in case San Francisco was going to run the ball back. But an absolutely magnificent final drive by Matt Ryan to get them in position to win the game. And then the kickoff happened. San Francisco gets the ball back, and they're trying to lateral it around, make something out of nothing. And they fumble the ball. Atlanta recovers and runs it all the way back for a touchdown, to give you the final score of 29-22. But an absolute stunning ending to this game. In a game where neither offense played, all that well, to be quite honest with you. Jimmy Garoppolo went 22-34 for 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 sack. And Matt Ryan went 25-39 for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks. So, similar stat lines from the quarterbacks in that retrospect. Both defenses did more for their teams in this game. It was just that Matt Ryan and the rest of that Falcons offense stepped up on that final drive when it mattered most. And so did Julio Jones, who had a final stat line of 13, 134, and 2 touchdowns in this game. A big monster day for Julio. And here's the final stat line for this one that I think is the most important. It was a low-scoring game, but Atlanta outscored San Francisco 19-9 in the fourth quarter. I know those numbers are a bit inflated because of that final special teams touchdown by the Falcons, but still, for a San Francisco defense that we've all heralded as being really great and one of the NFL's best, to get outscored in the fourth quarter in a home game against a team that was, 4 wins coming into this one, is a pretty bad look. It's not good. It was an incredibly strong finish by Atlanta, and there's nothing I can really point to and say this is the reason why San Francisco lost the game. In all honesty, I think it was kind of a thing where San Francisco was probably looking ahead on their schedule, because think about it. They came off the big shootout win against New Orleans last week, and then what do they have in this one? A home game versus at the time, a 4-win Atlanta Falcons team. Then what do they have next week? A big divisional matchup against the Rams. And what happens the week after that? A big divisional matchup against the Seahawks. So sandwiched between all of that is this little lowly Falcons team that was flying under the radar. And I think they caught the 49ers sleeping a bit. They underestimated the Falcons, and we should have known this was a trap game. Looking back at it in retrospect, it had all the makings of it. Coming off a big win, sandwich in between tough games. Lowly opponent that's not getting a lot of credit. It had literally every single earmark of being a trap game. And the 49ers fell for it, and it cost them dearly. Because we're going back and forth at this point in between who's the number one seed in the NFC every single week. Because coming into the weekend, the 49ers were the number one seed, and Seattle was the number 5 seed. Well, now at the end of the weekend, Seattle's back to being the number 1, and San Francisco's in the 5. In fact, San Francisco massively dropped the ball so much, if I'm doing my math correctly, they have to win out now, beat the Rams and beat Seattle now, in order to win their division and get that number 1 seed back. If not, they're kind of staring down the barrel of playing on wild card weekend as the 5 seed, which isn't going to sit well with how they've played for the majority of the season. And if they do end up being the wild card team at the 5 or 6 seed, well, it's going to be the 5 seed because, I don't see them dropping below anybody else. But this is going to be the game they'll point to, as they dropped the ball in this one massively. And I just want to point out one last thing. It was a really weird coincidence that Julio Jones had 13 catches for 134 yards. George Kittle, the San Francisco tight end, 13 catches for 134 yards. Really weird. Really weird. One weird thing of note, the Atlanta Falcons have a 3-game winning streak on the road lately. If I remember correctly, that's the blowout of New Orleans, the blowout of Carolina, and then now the sudden upset win over the 49ers. Definitely not the way Kyle Shanahan wanted to play his former team, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Once again, the Falcons win in shocking upset, 29-22. And while we're talking about the NFC West, let's talk about the new number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. The Seattle-Carolina game. Seattle wins a surprisingly close one at the end, 30-24. Seattle improves to 11-3, or the 1 seed like I just mentioned. And Carolina falls to 5-9. They've now lost 6 straight, and now it feels like they're almost inventing ways to lose. So, here's the setup for this one. Seattle has dominated this game for the most part against Carolina, in Carolina. Wilson has returned to his usual former great self that we had seen, for the majority of the season. Chris Carson is putting in work. Tyler Lockett is making some great catches. Freaking Josh Gordon suddenly appearing on the offense with a 58-yard reception. Everything is rolling Seattle's way. In fact, they're up 30-10 after a Chris Carson touchdown run, a 1-yard touchdown run, with 7 minutes and 18 seconds left in the game. So, by all intents and purposes, this game is over. Well, someone forgot to tell the Carolina Panthers that the game was over, as they quickly rip off 14 unanswered points to pull within 6 late, forcing Seattle to come back out and, suddenly start trying again. Russell Wilson comes back out with that offense, and they bleed the rest of that clock out and grind out a tough win on the road that was, for the majority of the game, wasn't as close as the final score indicates. For the most part, the Seattle defense held Kyle Allen in check. They forced him to have 3 interceptions in this game, and it just felt over. But I'm kind of worried about that Seattle defense, that they let this Carolina Panthers offense get back into it. On a day where Kyle Allen didn't play his best football, like I said, 3 interceptions, they come back from a 20-point deficit, and they racked up over 400 total yards of offense. That's really not encouraging from a team that's, currently slated as the 1 seed against a lowly Panthers team right now, who remember coming into this game couldn't get anything going on offense. But now they're suddenly putting a fear into the hearts of the Seahawks with literally minutes left on the game clock. But Seattle rode that offense to victory in this game, and they grinded one out. Here's some final numbers for you. Russell Wilson, 20 of 26 for 286 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks. His usual very productive, accurate, good self. Chris Carson, 24 rushes for 133 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Like I said, man was putting in work. Tyler Lockett, 8 catches, 120 yards, 1 touchdown catch. Big day for him. Really nice day for him. Then on the other hand, you had Kyle Allen, who didn't have the best game. 25 of 41 for 277 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, like I said, 1 sack. Christian McCaffrey did a lot of the work for this offense. 19 rushes, 87 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. He also caught 8 passes for 88 receiving yards. And DJ Moore continues to be, a nice little steady piece in that offense. 8 catches for 113 yards. It was just really interesting to see that fight in Carolina still being there after, they're in the middle of a 6-game losing streak, but they, kind of had Seattle's number late in the fourth quarter. It was not encouraging from a Seattle team that, probably took their foot way off the gas. But they ground out a tough win, and at this point in the season, that's all you got to do. Just keep ahead of the 49ers, and you'll be playing playoff football with home field advantage in CenturyLink Field, and that should scare the rest of the NFC playoff picture. Now, that's good news for Seattle. The bad news is there's kind of some fallout for this game from them. As I just mentioned, Josh Gordon had that big 58-yard reception in this game. He got suspended for violating the league's substance abuse policy and PEDs for what feels like the umpteenth time. And he's been suspended indefinitely again. And just when, that he felt like he made a big play and got back into that offense, he's been taken back out of it. It's a tough blow for Josh Gordon. It really is. It just sucks. It really does. Speaking to Carolina real quick, though, I feel like we're seeing the end of Kyle Allen now. I kept mentioning it the last 2 weeks that, if his performance doesn't improve to any regard, we're probably going to see Will Grier. Well, it sounds like we're going to see Will Grier this weekend. Because Kyle Allen has now thrown 15 interceptions in his last 8 games. Now on Monday, interim head coach Perry Fowell, I know I'm still butchering that name, refused to name who the starting quarterback will be this coming weekend. And if you've ever followed NFL, you know that is not a good sign for the current starter if your head coach isn't backing you up on Monday. If he's saying we're not naming a starter right now, that usually means you're about to lose your job. And Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network backed up that sentiment late Monday night when he said the expectation currently is to have Will Grier, the 3rd-round pick from the University of Western Virginia, start this Sunday. So, with 2 games left to go, they're going to see what Will Grier has in the tank. So that'll at least be interesting for Carolina, see what the rookie has. But once again, Seattle wins a close one at the buzzer, 30-24, and the Seattle Seahawks are your current number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. And we're moving on to a slightly less competitive game. New Orleans and Cincinnati. New England. New England wins this one 34-13. New England improves to 11-3 on the year, snaps a 2-game losing streak, so good for them. Cincinnati falls to 1-12 and has now lost 2 straight. Now, if you were watching this game in the first half, it looked nothing like a blowout. It was very sloppy and hard to watch, and it just de-evolved into a blowout in the second half for New England. It was ugly and sloppy in the first half for both teams, not just New England and not just Cincinnati, for both of them. Outside, because both teams scored a touchdown on their opening drive. New England got the ball first, they scored. Then Cincinnati got the ball next, they scored. After that, it was just punt, turnover, punt some more now. And then New England got a field goal at the end of the first half to go up 13-10. And it kind of looked more of the same of what we've seen from both teams so far this season. No real offense from Brady and the rest of that offense. And then, the Bengals sputtering offense. It felt more of like the same. In the second half, kind of a different story in some regard. As New England comes all the way back, they got a pick six from Stephon Gilmore on their defense that helped them get a defensive score to help get things moving. But, they didn't really move the ball well through the air. It was more the passing game. I mean, the running game, I should say. Definitely not the passing game. The run game for New England finally came alive as they racked up 175 rushing yards in this game that helped move the ball and get them in scoring position, and Brady threw 2 touchdowns. That defense also forced 5 turnovers. 5 turnovers in this game to help sink the Bengals. So it wasn't necessarily that Brady and that passing offense, finally came alive. It was more the run game and defense covered up for it. And the Bengals' ugly sloppiness doomed them in a close game, as Andy Dalton now throws a pick six in consecutive weeks now for the Cincinnati Bengals. But good news for the Pats. This has been what they've been missing all year long. Last year late in the season, they heavily relied on a defense and a run game to cover up their shortcomings on offense with Brady in that passing game. And they haven't had a reliable running game all year long, and it's left that offense getting exposed. Now what happens in this game? Their defense makes some big stops, gets some turnovers, gets a defensive score, and their rushing game covers up for their shortcomings. Now, granted, it was against the Bengals, easily the worst rush defense in the entire league. So I don't know if you can count on this Pats running game to come alive and bail them out every single week. You also can't count on a defensive score every single week from a team, no matter who's playing. Tom Brady in this game went 15 of 29 for 128 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks. Not that good. Really not that good. Andy Dalton, 17 of 31 for 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions. Joe Mixon had a nice day for the Bengals, 25 rushes for 136 yards. At least there's that for them. If the Patriots are going to win going forward, they need this running game to show up. They need it to show up every single week. They didn't even have a 100-yard rusher. It doesn't matter. They just got to manufacture some sort of run game to help move the ball. Because the way it was going before this game was very not good, and they were staring down the barrel of an early playoff exit. But if they can replicate what they did in the playoffs last year with the run game, I think they'll be fine. If you need an example of what they did late last season, go watch that Chargers-Patriots divisional playoff game and how New England literally slapped the life out of the Chargers on the opening drive with an dominating run game. It was like a 13-play drive that lasted like 8 minutes, and the Chargers were never the same after it. So if they can just replicate a run game, they'll be perfectly fine. Once again, New England wins a blowout 34-13. I guess it helped that they had, the Bengals' hand signals taped coming into the game. I guess that helped, New England improves to 11-3, and we're moving on to another blowout, this time later in the day. Rams at Cowboys. Cowboys win 44-21. Dallas improves to 7-7. They're back to 500. Snap a 3-game losing streak. Good for them. They finally beat a team over 500 people. Anything's possible now. Rams fall to 8-6. 8-6. I said snicks. 8-6. Snaps a 2-game winning streak for them as it puts their playoff hopes on life support now. Now, I want you to go back and look at this game. Clear your mind of everything that had happened over the past month for these two teams. And just think about this game. If you had told me to just sit down and watch these two teams play and guess which one was riding a 2-game winning streak and guess which one was riding a 3-game losing streak, I would have said the Cowboys are the ones riding the winning streak and the Rams are riding the losing streak. When in reality, it was the other way around. Because the Cowboys definitely looked the part of a world beater. The game was over at halftime, for crying out loud, as the Cowboys took a commanding 28-7 lead. Dak Prescott had that offense clicking on every cylinder and was looking as every bit as dangerous as, every stat and number said they were. You had Ezekiel Elliott was feasting. I mean, even Tony Pollard, the backup running back, had over 100 rushing yards. Granted, most of it came in garbage time, but still. This is important because the Cowboys did all of this damage, put up all those points, and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup weren't really that involved in the offense when you think about it. That's important because it shows you the Cowboys can score in different ways. It doesn't just have to come from Amari Cooper getting 8 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. And Michael Gallup doesn't have to get a 40-yard touchdown bomb. They can manufacture other ways to score. Let me get you some final stat lines here. Dak went 15 of 23 for 212 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ezekiel went 24 rushes, 117 rush yards, 2 touchdowns. Tony Pollard, 12 rushes for 131 yards, 1 touchdown. That Dallas run game just ate the Rams alive. There was no match for him. I mean, even Tavon Austin, the former Ram, who was taken in the top 10 of the first round the year he came out in the draft by the Rams, had a nice 50-plus yard touchdown reception. They were just getting ways to open. And it wasn't just their offense. Their defense suddenly came alive after quitting on them last week. And arguably had their best game of the season. 1 turnover, which, most people are going to roll their eyes at. But for the Cowboys, that's massive. They haven't gotten turnovers all season long. 2 sacks and only allowed 289 yards against a team that had racked up over 500 yards, I should say, over the last 2 games. This was the Cowboys' best day arguably all season. I mean, this is their biggest win by far, by a freaking long shot for the Cowboys. It was just an unreal day. And for the Rams, it felt off from the beginning, and it only got worse as time went on. Goff felt unsettled from the very beginning, and he took a shot to his hand on a pass. I think it was in the third quarter. His hand just came down on the top of one of his linemen's helmet about as hard as it could. And he looked even more out of sync after that point. This Rams offense just had nothing going for him and only really got going, in the fourth quarter when it was garbage time when they put up 14 points. Jared Goff finished 33 of 51 for 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 sacks. Tyler Higbee, their tight end, continues to be nice. 12 catches for 111 yards. But the bad news for the Rams is this was basically a death nail in their coffin. Because, they came in at 8-5, still technically in the hunt in the playoff picture, but they needed some help going into this game. But now that they lost, things aren't looking so good for them. If the Rams want to make the playoffs, their only hope would be the wild card. And in order to get the wild card, they would have to win out, so win these next 2 games. And then the Minnesota Vikings would have to lose their next 2 games. Which is technically possible, but it's a massive long shot. The Rams' playoff hopes are now effectively on life support at this point. You almost feel bad for them because it felt like they had turned a corner. They had really started feeling themselves. And then they came out in this game and just looked nothing like the team we had saw the last 2 weeks. And the same could be said for the Cowboys, who looked nothing like the downtrodden team we'd seen for like the past almost month. I cannot understate how massive this win was for Dallas. It almost validates everything Jerry Jones had been preaching for like every day after they would lose one of these games lately, where he says, we believe we can do this. We know we're good enough to win. And look at that. They went out and beat a team they really weren't supposed to beat. They went out and beat a team that's played pretty good lately. As the Cowboys finally beat a team with a winning record, they now move to 1-6 on the year against a team that's above 500. But this is a prime example of why the Cowboys have been so frustrating this year. When they're on, like they were in this game, when everything is clicking and everything is working fine, they show that they could beat anybody. And they can hang with the best. They just effectively killed off the Rams' season. But the problem is they aren't always on, and they're most definitely not always at their best. I mean, this was the Cowboys' best game since like October. They had that stretch where they just didn't play well for a long time. This was their best game since like October. But like I said, when they're on, they're world beaters, but they aren't always on. But this win now sets up a massive clash in Philadelphia next weekend, Week 16. If Dallas wins next weekend, they mathematically clinch the NFC East and punch their ticket to the postseason, which be pretty big. I mean, hey, at least there's that. At 7-7, Dallas is feeling great about their chances going into next weekend against Philadelphia. Once again, Dallas blows out the Rams, effectively ends their season for all intents and purposes, 44-21. And you know what? Let's stick in the NFC East. Let's go to Philly at Washington. Philadelphia wins a wild fourth quarter shootout, 37-27, as Philadelphia improves to 7-7 as well, just like the Cowboys. Has won two wins in a row. I can't talk. And Washington falls to 3-11 and have lost 2 straight. Carson Wentz hits wide receiver Greg Ward on a 4-yard touchdown pass with 26 seconds left. Greg Ward, the guy who was like literally on their practice squad for the vast majority of the year, where has he been this entire time? Gives the Eagles a go-ahead touchdown late in this game to take the lead back from Washington. On the ensuing drive, Dwayne Haskins is trying to get them in field goal range, trying to get something going, and he just has some sort of brain fart and kind of just fumbles the ball away. I think he was trying to throw it away, but he ends up just kind of fumbling it. Eagles recover and run it all the way back to get you the final score at 37-27. As the Eagles just rub more salt in the wound on Washington, as the Eagles keep their hopes of being NFC East champions alive. It was an odd game because it was very low scoring going into the fourth quarter. In fact, it was a 17-14 lead in favor of the Eagles at the start of the fourth quarter. Think about that. Then both offenses explode for 33 combined points in the fourth quarter. Like I said, a bit of a shootout in the fourth quarter. Carson Wentz had 3 touchdowns on the day and looked sharp on most of his throws. He had a really phenomenal touchdown pass to Miles Sanders in the back corner of the end zone. I think that was in the second half, if I remember correctly. Absolutely beautiful dot. One of the better throws you're going to see all season by Wentz. Now, he did have an ugly, ugly fumble about midway through the fourth quarter that, if I remember correctly, that allowed Washington to take the lead after that fumble. Eagles then get the ball back, and that was on the go-ahead touchdown drive where he hit Greg Ward. But it was a really good game for Carson Wentz, in my opinion. 30 of 43 for 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 sacks. It was a nice game for Wentz, in my opinion. And Miles Sanders, the running back, his stock just continues to go up, 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 up for the Eagles, what feels like every single week. 19 rushes, 122 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He also had that touchdown catch. Just really, really impressive day from the Eagles offense, who, remember, I have described them as slow, sloppy, sluggish. They had a nice game in this one. Racked up 415 yards of offense. The Eagles really, really needed that. I know it's against a 3-win Washington team, and I know Washington is nothing to write home about. But the Eagles have struggled to just do the basic things on offense. They racked up 37 points, over 400 yards of total offense. They really needed that confidence boost going into next week, especially after what Dallas did to the Rams. Now, that was very important for the Eagles to, rack up that many yards. And you know what? Washington actually showed some fight in this one. Dwayne Haskins had arguably the best game of his young career. 19 of 28 for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. The fumble, like I mentioned, not great numbers, but they're certainly better than anything he's put up so far this season. And Scary Terry McLaurin had one of his better games of his rookie season. 5 catches, 130 yards, 1 touchdown. And what I think is really important, they had those numbers as their former college head coach, Urban Meyer, was sitting up in one of those booths high up in the stadium watching. I'm going to call my shot now. I think Urban Meyer should be the odds-on favorite to be the next head coach of the Washington football team. It just makes too much sense that his former quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, is there. His former wide receiver, Terry McLaurin's there. It just makes so much sense for him to go there. And it feels like such a Dan Snyder move, too. It just feels like it. Where he would promise him a buttload of money. Hey, come and help your quarterback out. I promise it'll be fun. Once again, Urban Meyer is going to be the next head coach of Washington. No, I'm kidding. Philadelphia wins 37-27. Shootout in the fourth quarter. Philadelphia is technically tied with the Cowboys at the top of the NFC East. Kind of a winner-take-all matchup next weekend for the NFC East title. And we're moving on to a much less competitive game. Cleveland at Arizona. Arizona wins 38-24. Arizona improves to 4-9-1 on the season, snaps a 6-game losing streak. And Cleveland falls to 6-8 in what might be their most depressing loss of the season. Kenyon Drake, the Cardinals running back, had an absolutely career day in this one. As the Cardinals rout the downtroddenly bad Browns team. Kenyon Drake, 22 rushes, 137 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. He has become the first Cardinals player since 1993 to rush for 4 touchdowns in a game. Absolutely incredible stuff by Kenyon Drake. Also a career high in rushing, like I just said. And this one, the Cardinals started fast and kept the pressure on the Browns throughout the entire game. They were up 21-10 at the end of the first half. It was just too much to overcome for a bad Browns team, who found themselves in a double-digit hole at halftime as the Cardinals' hot start ended in good fashion as they racked up, 38 points and 450 total yards. Kyler Murray went 19-25 for 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It was, very nice day for the Cardinals. And there's reason to really be hopeful about them for next season. With Cliff and Kyler going into the offseason, they'll have more time to work with each other and gel and be more competitive next year. Kenyon Drake is going to be on the team next year. He's shown he's a very good building block. There's reason to be very optimistic about the Cardinals going into next year, especially with the signs that they've shown this year that they can be competitive. The bad news is that it feels like the Browns are on the verge of blowing everything up in the offseason. Baker Mayfield had another not good day, 30 of 43 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 sack. At least Nick Chubb had a nice day, 17 rushes, 127 yards, 1 touchdown. But the big story of note, going into this one, there was all that talk about Odell Beckham Jr. apparently telling opposing players and coaches before a couple Browns games this year that they should come and get him, as in come and get me out of this terrible situation, come make me a part of your team. Allegedly, according to Mike Silver, NFL Network's Mike Silver, before the game was over, a couple Browns players were apparently shouting at the Cardinals sideline, "Come get me." Just like Odell had apparently told other teams. One of those players includes Jarvis Landry. The guy who's represented Cleveland quite well since being traded there, 2 years now? It's a bad situation when players think Arizona is a better destination than Cleveland. It's bad then. There was also that scene where it looked like Jarvis Landry and Freddie Kitchens, their head coach, got into it and exchanged some heated words on the sideline. And then there was that picture of Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry sitting on the bench, and they just look absolutely dejected. They looked done. They looked over. They looked tired. Browns just feel like they're going to blow everything up. It feels like Odell wants out. It feels like now Jarvis Landry apparently wants out. And Freddie Kitchens just feels like he is way outmatched and outmanned. and just not the right fit for the job there. Arizona blew out a bad Browns team 38-24. Arizona's got a bright future ahead of them. They're showing signs of improvement. The Browns are showing signs of being worse week to week and just have something new go wrong every single week. Just an ugly situation in Cleveland. I mean, what else is new? And we're moving on to a much more competitive game, the Sunday Night Football game. Buffalo at Pittsburgh. Buffalo wins a tough defensive showdown, 17-10. Buffalo improves to 10-4 on the year. Pittsburgh falls to 8-6, snaps a 3-game winning streak. And oh man, the Bills got a big prime time win on Sunday Night Football. First time they've been on Sunday Night Football since 2007, and they clinched the playoff spot at the same time. How about them Bills? In a matchup of two premier defenses, it was the Bills defense that emerged as the superior one. Allowed only 229 total yards of offense, racked up 4 sacks, and forced 5 turnovers. 5. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 of those were interceptions from Devlin Duck Hodges, who threw some wounded ducks. See what I did there? Wounded ducks. Offensive woes once again held the Steelers back in this game. Duck Hodges went 22-38 for 202 yards, 1 touchdown. Like I said, 4 interceptions, 4 sacks. The Bills' offense wasn't much better, to be brutally honest about it. The Steelers' defense also held them to some low numbers. But they stepped up big when it mattered, as Josh Allen delivered a massive 6-play, 70-yard touchdown drive, capped off by a 14-yard touchdown pass to tight end Tyler Kroft for the go-ahead touchdown to put them up 17-10 with 7:55 left in the game. The Bills just outscored the Steelers 10-0 in the fourth quarter. And you're thinking, that's not that big of a number, only 10 points. But in a defensive game like this where, every little thing matters, that was absolutely massive by the Bills to outscore them 10-0 in the fourth quarter. That's how you finish strong. And in fact, the Bills put out a very balanced attack on offense. Had 131 rushing yards compared to 130 passing yards. So they also had, less than 250 total yards of offense, just like the Steelers, but it was balanced. They got Singletary going. Gore was involved. And Josh Allen didn't have to do too much through the passing game. Josh Allen finished the night 13-25, 130 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 sack. So they didn't put up crazy numbers, but they got the job done. For the Steelers, their offensive woes continued, like I said. James Conner was back in this game. Didn't really look like he was back. They racked up 51 total rush yards. That's not good. So a lot of their offensive production came from, Devlin Duck Hodges. But, for the Bills, I said that the Bills' offense was the better of the two, but I felt that it didn't matter because the game was in Pittsburgh. And I felt like that just favored the home team more. But this Bills team is getting better as the weeks roll on, and they're becoming a quality unit that can go into one of the more tougher places to get a win in the NFL, in Pittsburgh, in primetime, against the top 3 defense, and find a way to win. I don't understand how people don't love this Bills team. They are a fun, plucky underdog team that, yeah, they're not flashy, but how can you not pull for them? They're fun. They're the underdog. They're Buffalo, baby. Like I said, the Bills clinched a playoff spot, and in fact, they're sitting in great position to even win the AFC East. I know that's crazy to talk about, but they play the Patriots this Saturday, and it's very much a possibility that they could win that game and maybe win that division. They're built to go in there and win. They got a good defense. Their offense doesn't have to do too much. And remember, they gave the Patriots a run for their money earlier in the season. It's definitely possible. The good news is for the Steelers, they're probably still going to make the playoffs. They have a very soft schedule remaining. They play the Jets next weekend. And then the weekend after that, week 17, they're playing the Ravens, who are probably going to be sitting all their starters because they'll probably have clinched the number 1 seed by then. So the Steelers, just don't mess anything else up, and you should be good to go. for the playoffs. It was just a tough, close loss at home, and it underscores all the things people have said about Pittsburgh, is that their offense is going to hold them back at some point, and in this game, it absolutely did. It held them back. But they're not going to be playing a defense like Buffalo's every single week. That's good news for them, at least. Once again, Buffalo wins a heavy defensive showdown, 17-10 on Sunday Night Football. And we're moving on to the AFC West, actually. Denver at Kansas City. Kansas City wins 23-3. Kansas City improves to 10-4, have won 4 straight. Feeling really great about their chances right now. And the Broncos fall to 5-9 and snap a 2-game winning streak for them. So, if you didn't see this game, it was a snow game. Snow football is fun football. Very snowy, very cold Arrowhead, a lot of wind, just not great conditions you would think to throw the football. Mahomes didn't care. Mahomes was able to keep that Chiefs offense warm and humming as they just throttled the Broncos as the Drew Lock Express came plummeting back to earth as the Broncos have now lost 9 straight games versus Kansas City. That means they haven't won against Kansas City since like 2014, 2015, if I'm doing my math correctly. That's an awfully long time. So, you're looking at the score and you're saying 23-3, that doesn't sound like a great Chiefs performance. Despite the low score, that Chiefs offense was humming. Patrick Mahomes went 27-34, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 3 sacks. Like I said, those wintry conditions would slow down all quarterbacks, but Mahomes didn't seem fazed by it at all as he threw some pretty balls out there. Oh, that sounded weird. I hope nobody clips that off as a soundbite. And the Chiefs racked up over 419 total yards of offense as they just moved up and down the field on this Broncos team. As, like I said, Mahomes threw some nice passes. I almost said it again. Nice passes. They almost doubled the Broncos' output in total yards. Broncos racked up 251 yards. Travis Kelce was heavily involved, 11 catches, 142 yards. But I really want to give a big shout out to that Chiefs defense, who had another nice game. You know, like I said, only 251 yards. They got a turnover, 2 sacks, and only allowed 3 points. That Chiefs defense is coming together, and that team is coming together. And it's going to suck that they're probably not going to be a team that gets more than one home game in the playoffs, but their defense is becoming to the point where they can go on the road and win a game based off their defense. It's playing that good. Drew Lock went 18 of 40 for 208 yards, 1 interception, 2 sacks. They had no running game at all. Broncos went a combined 6 out of 17 on 3rd and 4th down in this game. Just a very not good day for the Broncos offense. And that Chiefs defense is putting in work, y'all. They're putting in W-O-R-K work. I'm starting to feel really confident that they can start shutting down anybody they play against. You know, because you remember last year and earlier in the season, the Chiefs had to put up, 35 to 40 points in a game because their defense was letting people score on them. But now it kind of feels like Kansas City can comfortably put up like 24 points, and their defense will hold you to less than 20. They're playing that good. I really like how Kansas City is rounding into the shape of a complete Super Bowl contender right now. Defense is there. Offense is showing it can do it. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. And they're just the third seed in the playoffs right now, which is even scarier. Once again, Kansas City wins a one-sided snowy affair. Snowy football is beautiful, best football. 23-3, and we're moving on to another odd game. Green Bay at Chicago. Green Bay wins a close one at the buzzer, 21-13. Green Bay improves to 11-3 on the year, have won 2 straight. Chicago falls to 7-7, snaps a 3-game winning streak, and Chicago has now been officially eliminated from the NFC playoffs. The Bears almost pulled off an improbable comeback in this one, but falls just short, effectively killing any postseason dreams they had. Chicago rallied late in this one. They only had 3 total points going into the fourth quarter of this game. They outscored Green Bay 10-0 in the fourth quarter. 10-0. To pull within 8 points down late. It comes down to a bunch of laterals. They get the ball back and, are doing some lateral magic, throwing the ball around, and it gets comfortably close to the end zone. The Bears are literally like within 6 to 5 yards of getting into the end zone. And Allen Robinson looks like he has a clear path, but I think it was Anthony Miller just doesn't see Robinson or just doesn't lateral it to him. And he gets tackled and the game's over. But it looked like Allen Robinson was going to score and give the Bears at least a chance to tie the game. But it just falls on deaf ears, and it was a case of too little too late for the Bears. But like I said, it was a very odd game. The Packers offense, once again, didn't put up big numbers. In fact, it was massively outgained by the Bears. Bears put up 415 yards of offense. Packers put up 292. Don't make sense, does it? Just don't make sense. So one would think that, the Bears put up 415 yards of offense, that they would put up more than 13 points of damage in this game. But they did turn the ball over 3 times, so that probably has something to do with it. A bend but don't break defense is what the Packers were in this game. They racked up a bunch of yards, but they only allowed 13 points, so at least there's that. Trubisky went 29 of 53 for 334 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 1 sack. Allen Robinson, the Bears wide receiver, went 7 for 125. But the Packers offense still felt off in this game. Rodgers went 16 to 33 for 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 sack. Devontae Adams, 7 catches, 103 yards, 1 touchdown. They had big contributions from Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, but it just still feels off. They got a big game coming up against Minnesota where they can clinch the NFC North, but it just feels off. But they won, and that's all that really matters for the Packers, that they found a way to win. And if they're lucky enough to get the 2nd seed in the playoffs, which if I remember correctly, they currently sit as the 2nd seed, teams are going to have to go into Lambeau Field in January in the cold and more than likely the snow and try to find a way to win. And that's going to be a tough ask for teams. Packers are 7-1 at home this season. And for the Bears, they were feeling confident about themselves. Their offense had been playing better. They were feeling good. And it all just came crashing down. And you got to feel for them, man. You really do. 7-7, and they are officially eliminated from the postseason. Once again, Packers win 21-13, and we're moving on to a blowout in Detroit. Tampa Bay at Detroit. Tampa Bay wins 38-17. Tampa Bay improves to 7-7, has won 4 straight. Oh man, what is with the Buccaneers? Lions fall to 3-10-1 and have lost 7 straight, and it just is not good for the Lions right now. The most ridiculous quarterback season of all time continues to roll on as Jameis Winston blows out a hapless Lion team and sets an NFL record at the same time. So, here's what the Jameis Winston method is. You ready? Throw an interception early. Then bombard the opposing team with a relentless aerial assault until they submit. And then cash out. That is the Jameis Winston method. You got to remember, Jameis Winston did not have Mike Evans in this game. Jameis Winston also has a tiny fracture in his right hand off of last game. And despite all of that, he set history. Jameis Winston became the first player in the history of the NFL to throw for 450 yards in consecutive games. Think about that. We're in the 100th season of the NFL, and no one has ever done what Winston just did. He finished the day 28 of 42 for 458 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 sacks. Oh. After that opening interception, which came on the first drive for the Tampa Bay offense, that Lions defense was mincemeat before Winston, who led Tampa Bay to rack up 495 total yards of offense on the day. They could have had more, but Chris Godwin, their wide receiver, who went 5 of 5 catches for 121 yards, hurt his hamstring in the third quarter, left the game. Sounds like he's done for the year. Massive blow to Tampa Bay. Uh, that vaunted O is starting to lose guys. That vaunted offense is starting to lose guys left and right. But at least they had Brashad Perryman, who had a career day. The running back racked up the most receiving yards he's ever had in a game. 5 catches, 113 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. You know why that's really impressive? Because Brashad Perryman's dad played for the Lions in the early to mid 90s. Caught 25 career touchdowns for the team. And here's his son playing against his dad's former team in Detroit, having a career day. It's funny how coincidences work out, huh? For the Lions, it was a game where they once again got no help from their offense. David Blau went 24-43 for 260 yards, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks. Danny Amendola, 8 catches, 102 yards. It was just not enough from the Lions. They're on the third-string quarterback. You know, Matthew Stafford was officially put on IR today. It's just, at this point, it's about draft position for the Lions. They're not really looking to be competitive at this point. They racked up 300 total yards of offense, which was nice, but nothing should really be expected from the Lions at this point. But for Tampa Bay, you know, they're still playing for, you know, something. Jameis Winston's trying to get a new contract. You got Shaquille Barrett on defense, who has 16 and a half sacks on the year. That ties a franchise record set by Warren Sapp, Tampa Bay Buccaneers legend. And he has 2 games now to break it. So, you know, they're still playing for something down at Tampa Bay, even though they're out of playoff contention. And the Buccaneers have a real chance to cause some havoc in the AFC playoff picture, because they play the Texans this coming Saturday. And if the Buccaneers can win that game, that sets up a winner-take-all match for the AFC South title Week 17 between the Titans and Texans, if I'm doing my math right. Buccaneers have a chance to cause some chaos. And isn't that the best Christmas gift of them all? just ripping hope out of another team's hands. It's a beautiful thing. Once again, Tampa Bay wins a blowout 38-17. And let's talk about the Texans and Titans in the AFC South. Houston at Tennessee. Houston wins a slugfest 24-21. Houston improves to 9-5 on the year. And Tennessee falls to 8-6, saps a 4-game winning streak. And that might have been the last straw for the Titans in this one. Houston wins an absolute slugfest to take over sole possession of the AFC South. So, here's the setup for this one. High-flying Titans offense, scoring like 30 points a game coming into this one. Absolutely sputtered in the first half of this game. Couldn't get anything going on at all. Had 2 long drives that ended in interception that got returned all the way to their red zone that set up a touchdown for the Texans, a Kenny Stills touchdown. Then they had a blocked field goal. Outside of that, the Titans offense didn't do jack diddly squat in the first quarter. Not first quarter, first half. There was an interception by Tannehill. Like I said, it was more of a fumble. He threw the ball, wasn't really possessed, but it got intercepted. It was more of a fumble kind of thing. As the Titans go into halftime down 14-0. These kind of things just haven't happened to the Titans since Tannehill took over, where they had a field goal block. There was that crazy interception that got ran all the way back to their red zone. You know, they just couldn't get anything going on offense. That just hasn't happened to them since he took over. In the second half, it was a different story, as the Titans scored 14 unanswered points to tie up the game in the fourth quarter. Then the Texans went on a mini run of themselves, scored 10 unanswered points to get the lead back late in the fourth quarter. Titans get the ball back and score a touchdown. I think it was to Dion Lewis, their backup running back, with a little more than 2 minutes left in the game, but they didn't get the onside kick back. Texans get the ball. They didn't drain a lot of the clock out. Titans get the ball back, down 3 with about 20 seconds left in the game, and they just can't get anything going, and time runs out. Texans hold on to win the game. It was a massive case of too little, too late for the Tennessee offense in this one. Houston found a way to ground this high-flying Titans offense, even though the Titans racked up over 400 yards of offense. They only scored 21 points, and that's massive. I think that was their lowest point total in a game since Ryan Tannehill took over. And they held Derrick Henry under 100 rushing yards. That's big. This is the first time that's happened in 8 games for the Titans. Let's see here. Some stat lines. Tannehill went 22 of 36 for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 sacks. A.J. Brown, their rookie wide receiver, 8 catches, 114 yards, 1 touchdown. Like I said, most of that damage came in the second half. But for the Texans, they got a big game out of their stars. Deshaun Watson looked really good coming down the stretch in the fourth quarter. 19 out of 27 for 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 sack. DeAndre Hopkins also took over in the fourth quarter and was just making circus catch after incredible catch. 6 catches, 119 yards. And Carlos Hyde, their trade acquisition from earlier in the year, 26 rushes, 104 yards, 1 touchdown. The Texans just made more big plays down the stretch in the fourth quarter to win the game. Texans started hot, and it was just too much to overcome for the Titans. In fact, this game was kind of like a perfect encapsulation of what the Titans season has been. Think about it. They have a terrible first half, like the first half of their season with Marcus Mariota. They dig themselves a massive hole. Then they get hot in the second half, make it close, but come up just short. And that feels like it's what's going to be defined as the Titans season, coming up just short. Remember how we talked about on Friday that even if the Texans lost, they would be sitting in great position to still win the AFC South? Now, because they won this game, the Texans can win the division if they beat Tampa Bay on Saturday. The Titans would have to win out, beat New Orleans and Tennessee, then win in Houston week 17, and Houston has to lose out. That's the only way, if I'm doing my math correctly. Tennessee has to win out and Houston has to lose out in order for Tennessee to win the division. Which is theoretically possible, but this was just a massive loss for the Titans. They dug themselves too big of a hole in the first half of the season, and it's coming back to haunt them. This was a game they really needed, and they didn't show up in the first half. They got outplayed. And the good news for the Texans, they showed up. They bounced back from that tough loss last week, and they're now in prime position to win their division against a banged-up Bucs team who is missing their top 2 wide receivers. Houston's sitting really, really pretty after this game. So we'll know by Saturday if the Houston Texans have clinched their division or not. They could lose their game. They could lose against Tampa Bay and still win the division on Sunday if Tennessee loses to New Orleans. It's not looking good for the Tennessee Titans right now, is what I'm getting at. This was a tough, tough loss for them as it puts their playoff hopes on life support, just like a bunch of other teams. Once again, Houston wins a slugfest 24-21. And we're moving on to New York. The Dolphins and Giants. Giants win this one 36-20. New York improves to 3-11, snaps a 9-game losing streak. Miami falls to 3-11 and have now lost 2 straight. It was ugly, and it wasn't pretty. But Eli Manning may have won his final home start as a New York Giant in 2019. Like I said, it wasn't pretty. Game was close at the end of the first half, 10-7 in favor of Miami. But in the second half, the Giants exploded on offense, scoring 3 touchdowns on their first 5 possessions in the second half. They outscored the Dolphins 29-10 in the second half entirely. Saquon Barkley looked like his old self, went 24 rushes for 112 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Haven't seen that from him in quite a while. Sterling Shepard had a nice day, 9 catches for 111 yards. And Eli Manning was far from perfect. He threw 3 interceptions. But he also went 20 of 28 for 283 yards and 2 touchdowns. This moment was about him and what he meant to that city and its fans. It was very touching watching him come off the field late in the game and have everybody in that stadium, even Dolphin fans that were there, giving him a standing ovation. He's been a true class act for the NFL, whether you love him or you hate him. He's been an absolute class act and handled everything that has gone on this season and every season with the utmost grace. Better than you can ask almost any player to handle anything. Speaking of the Dolphins real quick, because it was kind of a blowout in the second half, the Dolphins are such an odd team. I mean, for crying out loud, Ryan Fitzpatrick is their leading rusher on the season. That's never a good sign. But their red zone struggles continued in this one once again. They went 0-2 in red zone attempts in this game. They're now combined 0-8 over the last 2 weeks, which is never, ever a good thing. At least they moved the ball well. They racked up 384 total yards. They just couldn't finish drives, which is a massive recipe for disaster in this league. Ryan Fitzpatrick went 23 of 41 for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 sacks. He took a big hit in the third quarter and looked kind of out of it after that. But at that point, the game was already out of hand. I'm going to go through this game quickly because we're kind of running short on time. But neither of these teams is going anywhere. They're looking at draft position at this point and all that, this and that. With neither of these teams going anywhere, it was really nice to just take a moment to celebrate Eli Manning. And like I said, he's been a true class act, and it was very touching and moving. This should be how we remember Eli Manning. Not being benched for a rookie after starting 0-2 this season. Going out with a win in his final start as a New York Giant. Maybe Daniel Jones comes back next week, but this is his final start at home in front of his fans. This should be how we remember him. Not going out after 0-2 and getting benched for Daniel Jones. We shouldn't remember him like that. We should remember the guy who won 2 Super Bowls, the guy who went 8-4 in the playoffs, and the guy whose final home game came as a win against the Dolphins. That's how we should remember Eli Manning. And it was a very touching and nice moment. And it was just nice to take a step back, looking at more than just, results and figures and just kind of living in the moment for once. It was very nice and touching. Once again, the Giants win 36-20. And good for Eli Manning. He's a good guy and he deserves it. And we're moving on to a blowout in L.A. Minnesota at the Chargers. Minnesota wins 39-10. Minnesota improves to 10-4 on the year. It's won 2 straight. Chargers fall to 5-9 and have now lost a game. I almost said 3 games in a row, and that's not true. I don't know why I did that. Vikings go on the road, and I say that in quotation marks because it felt like a home game for them with the amount of fans in Vikings purple in the Chargers arena, and win a one-sided game as the Chargers find another new low to sink to. So, in a similar repeat of last week's game versus the Lions, this game was won on the back of the Vikings defense, as their offense once again didn't do too much, as the Vikings defense took advantage of a very mistake-prone Chargers team that turned the ball over a whopping 7 times. 7! How do you do that? Vikings got 20 points off those turnovers, so that's nice for them. That's the most turnovers a Mike Zimmer coached defense has gotten in a game since 2003, when the Cowboys got 6 turnovers against a Washington football team in a game. So here's a deep dive nugget for you. The last time the Vikings forced 7 turnovers in a game? September 24th, 1995. The last time the Chargers turned the ball over at least 7 times in a game? December 13th, 1998. There you go. There's a deep dive nugget for you. I asked the Vikings defense to go on the road against a slightly tougher opponent in Phillip Rivers and show me something. And guess what? They showed me something, baby. They showed me something in spades. Ho, ho, ho. Phillip Rivers did not have a good day at all. 28 of 39, 307 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks. 3 interceptions. So the other 4 turnovers came on fumbles. Melvin Gordon had 2 in this game. Fumbled. His second fumble came early in the second half, and he got benched for the rest of the game, which is a really, really bad look for poor Melvin Gordon. This Chargers offense is very bad. At this point, Phillip Rivers is just throwing up hot air balloons on almost every pass. It's just a grip it and rip it and hope your guy comes down with it. And it feels like usually it's going to be intercepted or something like that. Chargers offense is very not bad. But I think the big thing of note of this game is that Dalvin Cook once again injured his shoulder in this one and left the game early. It sounds like he may not play for the remainder of the regular season. And if that's the case, that is an absolutely massive blow to the Vikings' chances of winning the NFC North. The rest of their offense did okay. Like I said, they didn't do much in this game, but they didn't have to because their defense was playing so freaking well. 19 of 25 for 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. They played great on defense. Absolutely phenomenal. And they're getting better each week. Now they've strung together 2 strong performances. And you know who they play on Monday Night Football next week? A Green Bay Packers offense that just feels off, doesn't it? And here comes a high-flying Vikings defense that has wrecked 2 teams in a row. This is going to be very interesting. Vikings are going to need their offense to step up a little bit, though. If they're going to win the NFC North, and I do think they're a better team than the Packers, if Dalvin Cook isn't there, that's a massive blow. They're going to have their offense step up. You know, Kirk Cousins is going to have to turn the clock back a bit and be that guy that he was in October and just start slinging it all over the yard. They got Adam Thielen back in this game. So Thielen, Diggs, and Rudolph and Cousins, they're probably going to have a pretty heavy load on Monday night in order to give their team a win. But you know what? Maybe they don't have to be great on offense. If their defense is going to play this good, now granted, they're not going to get 7 turnovers every week. They probably aren't even going to get 4 every week. But they're playing good and they're holding their team up. They're holding that other team at bay, and that's all that matters for them. So maybe they don't have to be, you know, this high-scoring offense anymore. They've gone through so many changes. They were this ancient, archaic, run-heavy team in the beginning of the season, then became a high-flying offense halfway through the season, and now they're a defensive-heavy team here at the end of the season. They feel like such a team with multiple personalities at this point. It's so odd. Once again, Vikings win a blowout in LA 39-10 and improve to 10-4, and are going into a titanic clash on Monday Night Football against the Packers. If the Packers win that game, they clinch the NFC North. So it's a very massive game for both teams. And we're moving on to, let's call it the most depressing result of the weekend. Depending on who you ask. Jacksonville at Oakland. Jacksonville wins 20-16. Jacksonville improves to 5-9 on the year, snaps a 5-game losing streak. Oakland falls to 6-8 and has now lost 4 straight. And just a brutal gut punch for the final game in Oakland for the Raiders. The final game ends in heartbreaking fashion for the Raiders as they let a lowly Jags team steal a win from them. It was sad. It was really sad. It felt like watching a repeat of these last few weeks for both of these teams in this game. In the first half, it was for the Jags. They get down double digits. They're down 16-3. Nothing is going right for their offense. They're on the road against a team that's bearing down on them. It just feels like it's on the road to being another blowout loss for them. And to be like their 5th straight blowout loss. I mean, 6th straight blowout loss, for crying out loud. And it just felt like, you know, the Raiders were about to cruise to a win in their final game and give their people, their fans, a happy send-off. Then for the 2nd week in a row, the Raiders did not score a second half point. Not one. Not a single point in the second half for the 2nd week in a row. In fact, the Jags scored 17 unanswered points in the second half to wrestle the lead away from the Raiders. And a Hail Mary attempt by Derek Carr and that Raiders offense was left unanswered. And the last home game for the Raiders just ends in heartbreaking fashion as they blow a double-digit lead in the second half. Now, I want to preface this by saying there was that terrible call by the referees on Derek Carr, who slid down, and the ref stopped the clock when it shouldn't have been stopped, and it wasn't reviewed. And if they had, they would have let the clock keep running and allowed the Raiders to bleed out the clock. It wasn't called that. Jags basically are given an extra timeout, and Raiders are pointing to that and saying, if that isn't called, we probably win the game. And that may have been true, but you're also had a chance to stop this Jags team. It's not like, they got the ball right at the 1 yard line or anything to start their drive. They had to drive a pretty good portion of the field to get that scoring touchdown to go ahead. You could have stopped them at any point. I mean, this lowly Jags team has scored 20 points? Less than that the last 5 weeks? And you couldn't stop them? Yeah, it was a terrible call against the Raiders, but they had plenty of opportunities to win this game. Neither offense really played well in this game, and let me say that, especially the Raiders, who went 0 for 3 in the red zone. How do you do that against this terrible Jags team? How do you do that? Derek Carr went 22 of 36 for 267 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 sacks. Gardner Minshew put up almost an identical stat line, 17 of 29 for 267 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 sacks. Virtually identical numbers by the quarterbacks. Darren Waller, the Raiders tight end, 8 catches, 122 yards. The Raiders had this win. I don't know what the deal was in the second half. Maybe they got complacent. Maybe they got ahead of themselves. They just blew a double-digit second-half lead in their last home game in Oakland. I don't understand how you do that against a team that was losing by 30 points a game the last 5 weeks. How do you do that? How are you that bad? It boggles my mind. There's been a lot said about what happened after the game, with some Raiders fans rushing the field and some throwing some garbage on the field, whether it was beers or food. I know some people are going to point to that and say, oh, look at these terrible people in Oakland. I don't want to do that. These people were upset and emotional after their team is being ripped away from them, and this is their lasting memory of their team choking away a double-digit lead to one of the worst teams in the league over the last month. This is their final memory? Of course they were upset. Of course they were angry. That doesn't excuse what some fans did who took it too far, but most of those fans, didn't do anything wrong. They just wanted to, not leave because they didn't want any of this to end. Before their game, there was a lot of reportedly hugging and crying by these Raider fans who were all in face makeup and the huge spiked shoulder pads. I mean, if you've watched a Raiders game, you've seen the black hole. You know what those people are like. They're one of the most passionate fan bases, not just in football, but all of sports, in my opinion. And it sucks that their team is being taken away from them. It really does. And you know what's really sad is that choking away a double-digit lead in the second half to a bad Jags team is kind of fitting for what the Raiders have been for 20 years. I mean, go back and look at what they've done since the year 2000. Hasn't been very good. They had a couple winning seasons early in 2000 with John Gruden in his first run. They went to a Super Bowl the year after Gruden. Then after that, absolutely nothing. A bunch of 4 to 6 win seasons. They had that one 12-4 win season 5 years ago, but other than that, it's been a lot of terrible, bad, losing football. So it's almost fitting that, to what the Raiders have been the last 20 years, that they lost the game in this fashion. But like I said, this sucks that this is the lasting memory for the Raiders. It would have been so beautiful if they had caught that Hail Mary and won the game. Everybody would talk about it from here to the end of time, how the last Raiders game was a win. But it will forever be remembered as a loss. A loss to a terrible Jag team that they shouldn't have lost to. The good people of Oakland deserve much better. And you know what? I hope they one day find peace, because it's never a fun or good thing when your NFL team is uprooted and moved. I mean, it's been chronicled throughout the history of the NFL team. When the team leaves, those fans are heartbroken and they're upset. And one day I hope the Raider fans can find peace. They deserved winning football. And their lasting memory, the last image of football in Oakland, is their team losing to a terrible Jags team. That sucks. That really sucks. If you wanted to read more about that final game in Oakland, there's a great piece by the NFL Network's Mark Sessler, who was at the game in Oakland, who was there the entire day, tailgated with some fans, moved around the entire stadium throughout the game, was there for the entire, I guess, shenanigans after the game, and wrote all about it on the NFL Network's website. If you want, it's a great long read. Please go check that out. It really does justice to what that final game meant to those fans in Oakland. Once again, the Raiders lose their final game in Oakland 20-16. And next year, they're going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. And we'll see what that's like. Moving on to our final game. I promise we'll end on a much more uplifting note than that depressing one the Raiders left on. Indianapolis and New Orleans. Final game. New Orleans wins a blowout 34-7 on Monday Night Football. New Orleans improves to 11-3 on the year, and Indianapolis falls to 6-8 and have now lost 4 straight. Drew Brees has an absolutely magical night, one of the best games of his entire career, as the Saints blow out the Colts. It felt over before it even got a chance to start, in all honesty, and the numbers reflect that. Saints outgained the Colts 424 yards to 205 yards. So they more than doubled the Colts' output on offense. It was a flat-out slaughter on Monday Night Football, led by Drew Brees. Drew broke Peyton Manning's all-time touchdown record after a touchdown throw to Josh Hill in the third quarter. And it was a very beautiful moment to just, watch Drew take a moment to celebrate it. Walked around, waved to the fans. It was a great thing that had happened in New Orleans. And it's funny. Hasn't, Drew Brees' record-breaking performances always come on Monday Night Football? Didn't he break Johnny Unitas's all-time consecutive touchdown record on Monday Night Football too? And now he breaks Peyton Manning's record? It was a really just beautiful, great moment to celebrate for Drew Brees, who is an all-time great quarterback. Not just all-time great quarterback. He's an all-time great player. And all honesty, I think we're going to remember Drew Brees as probably one of the top 5 best quarterbacks to ever play. In all honesty, he has just been truly magnificent. And he wasn't done after he, broke the record. He set a new one, as he now holds the career touchdown records in a career at 541 after his 4 touchdown performance in this one. He put on an absolute clinic in this game. He only threw 1 incompletion, went 29-30 for 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. Oh my gosh. Like I said, it was one of the best games of his career because he only threw 1 incompletion, people. Put on an absolute clinic from beginning to end of the game. Michael Thomas also had a really good night. 12 catches, 128 yards, 1 touchdown. Just a big, big night for the Saints passing offense, who has really come alive the last few weeks. If I'm doing my math correctly, it's 8 or 9 touchdown passes the last 2 weeks? That's great for the Saints. But, oh man, you got to feel sorry for the Colts. They looked outclassed in this game. Outmatched and outmanned from the very beginning. In fact, it almost looked like these two teams were playing a different sport altogether. The Colts just aren't built right now to score a lot of points. Jacoby Brissett went 18-34 for 165 yards, 1 sack. That's his entire stat line. Colts just aren't built to score points right now. They're kind of a run-first team. They did put up points last week against Tampa Bay, but that was only because Winston pulled a Winston. And we've all talked about what that is. Colts are going to have to go into this offseason and do some retooling and become more of a team that can put up points because they're going to have to keep pace with a Tennessee and a Houston team next year. And they can't win games like this. Against a vastly superior team, they just look outclassed. Drew has really come alive these last two games. Like I said, like 8 or 9 passing touchdowns. And he's coming alive at the perfect time because there were questions about that Saints offense that, can they really blow these teams out? Can they really win shootouts? Can they put up numbers in a postseason against good teams? Colts aren't a good team, but they're answering the question of whether that offense still has gas left in the tank. And they're passing that test with flying colors as Drew Brees is just racking up the records at this point. I mean, my goodness, what record doesn't he hold at this point? It's ridiculous. Just an all-time class act and a really great guy, Drew Brees is. Great quarterback. Like I said, when it's all said and done, at bare minimum, he's going to be talked about as one of the top 5 quarterbacks to ever play the game. First ballot Hall of Famer. Dude is simply phenomenal. And he's catching on fire right when it matters most, coming down the stretch of the postseason. It's getting real interesting at the top of the NFC. So, that's it for our recaps. There's no Thursday Night Football this week, so no preview at the end of the show. We're going to leave it on this note. We're going to recap the playoff positioning of each team real quick here in this last minute. We're going to start in the NFC with the aforementioned Seahawks at the 1 seed. That means if the season ended right now, they would get home field advantage throughout the playoffs and a first-round bye. Green Bay is currently at the 2 seed. They would get home field advantage until they played Seattle, assumingly, and a first-round bye. In the 3 seed, that is... I don't know why I put Seattle there. That is not what I meant. New Orleans is the 3 seed. I don't know why I have Seattle here in my notes. It's supposed to say New Orleans. New Orleans is currently the 3 seed right behind Green Bay. So that means if the season ended right now, New Orleans is playing on Wild Card Weekend. And Dallas at the 4 seed, even though they're 7-7, they're still leading their division, and that means they're going to get a home playoff game. At the 5 seed, it's San Francisco, not where they want to be. And at the 6 seed, it's Minnesota. In the hunt right now in the NFC, it's Philadelphia, whose only hope at the playoffs is winning the NFC East. And the Rams, who, as I mentioned, they have to win out, and the Vikings have to lose out to have a chance to make the playoffs. That's what we're looking at in the NFC. In the AFC, the Ravens have the 1 seed. New England has the 2nd seed. Kansas City at 3. Houston at 4. All of those are almost all guaranteed to be, your division winners. New England is going to have to win against Buffalo on Saturday, and we'll talk about that on the preview piece, but all of those feel like a lock at this point. Then at the 5 seed, you have Buffalo. At the 6 seed, you have Pittsburgh. And then Tennessee is really the only team left in the hunt in the AFC. They're going to need a lot of help if they're going to make the playoffs. So, that's your playoff picture, and that's it for our Tuesday recap show. The next time we talk will be Friday, where we'll preview all 16 games of this coming weekend, Week 16. Remember, we have games on Saturday this weekend. 3 games, 3 big games. Houston and Tampa Bay, Buffalo and New England, and San Francisco and the Rams. All massive games, all have playoff implications written all over them. So we'll talk about all the games on Saturday, all the games on Sunday, and the game on Monday night. So thanks for stopping by for Tuesday's show, and I guess we'll talk all these games, previews, and playoff implications and more on Friday's show. Bye.